This is the Brown's 14 Grammatical Morphemes again. It's in a different layout. This is in your digital handouts. I encourage you to keep it handy. It is an excellent resource for the SLP as well as parents. As I stated earlier, treatment decisions should take into account the typical developmental order of acquisition. Feinstack and Satterlin conducted an online survey of 338 SLPs in 2018. The aim of their study was to better understand current grammatical intervention approaches. We know grammatical language is a common weakness among children with language impairments, but relatively little was known about current grammatical intervention practices of SLPs. So the purpose of their study was to survey currently practicing SLPs about the intervention approaches that they were using when targeting grammatical forms. The survey indicated SLPs targeted first plural S, present progressive, past tense verbs, pronouns, and possessives. The procedures used in all of these are evidence-based procedures. Is first modeling. In modeling, the child is not required to respond. They merely listen to the examples of the target structure. The second procedure they used was recast. Recast is repeating the child's incorrect utterance in the corrected form. For example, if the child says, "The 2 mouses ate the cheese," the SLP says, "Yes, the 2 mice ate the cheese." The clinician does not initiate teaching directly, but we're going to manipulate those play activities to increase the chance of the child using the targeted grammatical forms. The theory behind recast is the child is more likely to be interested in what the adult is saying because it links semantically to what they just said. Ebels found recasting tends to lead to faster generalization to spontaneous speech. Again, Fay, Long, and Feinstack presented 10 principles that they regarded as essential for planning adequate interventions for children with language learning problems, including grammar. These principles are relevant for all children with problems in the use of grammar, but they are especially appropriate for 3 through 8-year-olds. As stated earlier, elicited imitation is a far more intrusive technique than recasting. Imitation is not the means through which the child learns language, but it is used to gain the child's attention and production of grammatical features that may be difficult for the child to understand or produce. Imitation practice can be used with alternating targets. This will focus the child's attention on the target. For example, future tense and past tense ED, using will for future tense, then contrasting with the past tense ED. For example, the SLP says, "Say Dad will wash the dishes." Then the child says, "Dad will wash the dishes." The SLP is going to pretend that the dad is washing the dishes. Then the SLP says, "Dad washed the dishes." Say Dad washed the dishes. The child says, "Dad washed the dishes." This can be referred to as a contrastive imitation. In this case, we are contrasting future tense and past tense. Dad will wash the dishes versus Dad washed the dishes. Children learn to produce a novel verb best when it was impending. Children comprehend the verb equally well in impending and completed conditions. So basically, children produce verbs best before the actions occur. Children comprehend the verb equally between before the action occurs, during the action, and in completion. As clinicians, we can utilize this in therapy. For example, using props of several children figures in a pool, you can say the children want to go swimming. "Please, can we go swimming?" What do the children want to do? Okay, Here's another example. You need to clean your room before we go. What do you need to do? We're trying to elicit the word clean. Remember, impending situations help with producing the verb, but comprehension is the same for impending and completed conditions. This is a list of the 50 most frequent verbs produced by English-speaking caregivers listed in order of frequency. So you can see here that English-speaking caregivers, the number one word they used was go. Number 2, want. They also found that 76% of the first 50 most frequent verbs refer to physical motions. I will be reviewing Crystal's criteria levels for verb selections and reviewing the latest research. Okay, number 1. Verbs should express a clear, physical, dynamic action. Recent research distinguishes verbs that can be characterized as having an endpoint from those that have no specified endpoint. For example, walked to the park provides an endpoint. Walked around the park has no endpoint. They suggest using verbs that represent a completed action with a defined endpoint. So, I have here some examples. This is an example of a verb with an endpoint. The girl rode to the barn. The horse walked to the barn. The girl kicked the ball into the goal. Again, I am stressing the endpoint, a destination. A completed action. Peppa Pig drove to the grocery store. Most irregular past tense forms occurs by rote learning rather than applying a rule system. Children need to learn irregular forms as individual vocabulary words. Again, I want to stress by rote learning. The difficulties presented by irregular verbs is that there is so many different irregularities that occur. Most irregularities are characterized by vowel change. For example, fly, flew, blow, blew, sing, sang, grow, grew. Some verbs add a t or a d, such as make or made. And then there are verbs that do not change at all to form a past tense. Beat, cut, hit. There are actually 10 classes of irregular past tense formations and dozens of subclasses. This variety increases the difficulty of the learning task. It is clear that rote learning is necessary to acquire irregular past tense forms. For example, the pair go, went, could not be learned in any other way. Bybee and Slobin found that children tend to learn irregular forms as individual vocabulary words rather than by applying specific phonological or morphological rules to the different base morphemes. This chart was adapted from Shipley, Maddox, and Driver's article, Children's Development of Irregular Past Tense Verbs. This chart can be used clinically because we know what irregular form terms to target for, say, a 3-year-old. We would not want to teach a 4-year-old irregular verbs such as bent, held, sang, fought. As I said before, we need to select verb targets carefully instead of arbitrarily just picking verb targets based on our picture cards or manipulatives that we have on hand. Saw, gave, and ate are early developing irregular past tense verbs. Here we can look at the banana and pizza and then cover them up. The child tells you what they saw. Then uncover the two items. Give the child a banana. Have the child give you the pizza to elicit gave. Then pretend to eat the banana or pizza to elicit ate. In this one activity, we targeted 3 early developing irregular past tense verbs: saw, gave, and ate. Rice and colleagues found that difficulty with past tense beyond the developmental time period is a defining clinical marker of children with language impairment. Accordingly, we commonly have past tense goals. So now I'm going to be talking about past tense verbs, regular ED. So again, regular plurals generated by a rule add S or ES. Irregular plurals are memorized. Now we are going to put this information I have talked about together. This is an example lesson for teaching irregular plurals. The lesson will be taught in a story context. In addition, a combination of instructional methods that I have discussed earlier will be used. Modeling, no response is required. Recast, immediately repeat the child's incorrect utterance in the correct form. Elicited imitation, it can be made with alternating targets. Increase saliency, think of length, loudness, dynamic pitch. And also there are two socially acceptable ways. The target form appears at the end of a sentence or force a contrast so the target form is highly informative. Okay, so here's the story. The geese at the lake. Annie and Ben went to the lake with their mom and dad. They were having a picnic. Mom took out a piece of bread and a chicken leg for the kids' picnic. Mom says, "Look at the geese swimming. Do you see the geese?" The children say, "Yes." Okay, notice that Mom modeled the word geese by making it louder, longer, and increase the saliency by using it again in the final position. So a book that is excellent to teach possessive is Lily's Big Day by Kevin Hinks. The possessives occur 11 times. Community helpers also provide excellent toys to elicit possessives. For example, if I have a fireman in a fire truck, you can elicit the following: fireman's hat, fireman's boots, fireman's jacket, fireman's hose, fireman's truck. The list goes on and on. Okay, preschoolers produce possessive 3 times more often when they listen to and retold stories than in conversation. So knowing that fact, I want the child to listen to and retell stories. Now I want to talk to you about resources. There are numerous resources on the market today that target grammatical morphology. I will be reviewing some of my favorite resources.